Time now for the Sunday Talk, where we tap into the debate of the week. This week, the media and the U.S. election. A lot of people were stunned by the Trump victory, including news outlets. American networks are now looking back at the whole campaign, wondering where they might have got it wrong.
I'm joined now on the phone from New York by the man that has shaken up the Republican race.
Joining me now on the phone is Donald Trump. Hello, Mr. Trump.
How are you, Don?
For months, it seemed Donald Trump was forever on the line, given loads of free airtime. On the late-night shows, too.
You say some shocking things. I can't even believe.
But I'm trying not to.
Yeah.
The media lapped it all up.
It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. That's all I got to say.
Network ratings soared, and so did Trump's. Gradually, the tone became more mocking.
Just listen, women, if you give me a chance, I promise I can do a whole lot more than just grab it. I can also bop it, twist it, and pull it.
At rallies, his supporters were mocked too. The media honing in on only the most outrageous, what Hillary Clinton would call the deplorables.
What makes you think she has AIDS?
The way her husband used to be.
Tell me about your shirt. What's it say?
Hillary sucks, but not like Monica.
Some Republican voters with real concerns felt ignored.
We should have a thoughtful, interesting debate on issues.
As a Trump presidency began to look more possible, journalists started to look at his positions more critically.
Riling up all forms of bigotry and hatred.
Explicitly racist.
It's called scapegoating, it's called racism.
But Trump said voters were with him, not the media.
They want to poison the minds of the voters.
I'm joined by our panelists. Jonathan Kay is editor-in-chief of Walrus Magazine. Elamine Abdelmahmoud is social media editor at BuzzFeed Canada. And Adrienne Batra is the editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun. I thought I'd start with you tonight. Adrienne, your paper leans right. Did the other media, did the American media in general, did it miss the boat on this campaign?
Absolutely it did. And you even see so many in the American media today in the last, I'd say 72 hours, having this self-reflection and telling themselves they need to look in the mirror, that this was not a shock to millions of Americans, but it was a shock in the newsrooms at the Washington Post, at the New York Times, at CNN, because they, for far too long, have become, and what many in the public would have perceived, an arm of the Democratic Party. We saw many things come out in WikiLeaks, but even putting that aside for a moment, for far too long, the Trump supporters had been called racists, sexists, misogynists. Clinton called them a basket full of deplorables, and then the media picked up that language. They picked up that language and said to Hillary Clinton, there's no way you're going to lose to Donald Trump, and almost chastising her voters. Well, it turns out, Wendy, that millions of Americans don't like to be called those sorts of names, and they showed their distaste for not only the Democratic nominee, but also the media at the ballot box.
What's your sense, Elamine?
You know, I don't think the media actually missed the story here. I think, for the most part, they went into these regions. I think we saw a lot of reporters that went into the heartlands, went into rural areas. They met with these voters. They listened to them. They might have misunderestimated. That's a George Bush quote. Misunderestimated the anger that was there, right? Underestimating that particular population and its and how disappointed it is in the establishment. That was definitely a mistake that the media made. But I think they sort of picked up on the undercurrent that was happening.
But it confounded them. You could tell it in their reporting. It just confounded them. How could you be so upset?
Sure. I don't think the media understood it fully.
I have a somewhat different take on that. I actually think the media was somewhat fascinated by how people could vote for Donald Trump. And it's true, they condescended to it.
Yes.
The attitude was, wow, I guess, you lost your job and you are so despairing that you will vote for this guy. But I mean, a lot of the curiosity was genuine. National Public Radio, I think, was a model in this regard. They had reporters all over Florida, all over Ohio, the swing states, and some really good reporting in terms of asking people. I remember there was one couple, they were in their 70s, they were lifelong Democrats, and for them, they were thinking about Trump because it was all about immigration, it was all about crime, and yes, there was a slightly condescending aspect to it, but I learned a lot. I actually think the biggest mistake the media made was that they overestimated how much enthusiasm there was for Hillary Clinton.
I think that's
and there was 99% of the attention was on Trump. Meanwhile, the story the media missed was just how underwhelming a candidate Hillary Clinton was. And a reason for that, one reason I think, is that the Trump attack on Clinton was so over the top and easily debunkable, lock her up, that the media missed some of the more nuanced reasons that she wasn't a good candidate and that kept people home on election day.
But her unlikability has been a thread throughout this entire campaign for like at least a year.
Well, exactly. And then everything that has come out, in even a few weeks before the election, that, with the FBI and all this stuff in WikiLeaks, and it just piled on to why there was such a fundamental distrust of Hillary Clinton.
But she has valid grounds for complaint. I mean, that second blow up at the FBI, it was just a completely gratuitous thing, especially since we learned that...
But she was whether or not it was biased, because it sounded like you were saying they were biased against Donald Trump. Now it sounds like it was biased against Hillary Clinton.
Well, I think there's elements of both, actually, because Donald Trump, to be sure, did benefit from a lot of free media attention from the get-go.
So then, if it was biased in both directions, depending on the outlet on the time, what was the fault?
I think in the crucial last couple of weeks of the election campaign, the bias was against Hillary Clinton for the following reason, is that I think you had a lot of liberal media who were bending over backwards to try and give the appearance of being balanced. So it was like, all right, Trump did this crazy, outrageous thing, for instance, suggesting that he wouldn't respect the results of the election if it didn't go his way.
Which is crazy.
Which is completely insane. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton used the wrong kind of email server. And then, earlier in the campaign, it was, Donald Trump actually disrespects the Muslim family of a war hero, like the most insane thing possible. And then it's like, on the other hand, Hillary Clinton used the wrong kind of email server. And so you had this false equivalence that liberal media was bending over backwards trying to be fair to Trump, and in the process, I think they screwed Hillary Clinton.
Elamin, I just want to get, you're a social media guy. How much did that influence the media's coverage here? I mean, a lot of it is clickbait, and Donald Trump was tweeting all the time. He says he's going to be restrained now, we'll see. But how much did that influence things, and how much were people watching on Facebook instead of watching CNN or Fox?
Quite a bit. I think in this particular election, Donald Trump knew he was smart enough to skip the pipeline of the traditional media and just go directly to the people who were following him. So there was not even one chance of a journalist interpreting Donald Trump for people. Donald Trump is just right there in front of people speaking himself. I think today there were a few tweets that came out from his digital director, the digital director of the campaign, and he said that this one Facebook guy was their MVP in terms of fundraising, because they could target very specifically people who were really disappointed in the establishment. They nailed them right down to a T, and they got money from them. They just entirely skipped over the traditional forms of having to buy media, having to go through journalists, having to do press conferences, and he just went directly to people, and it
that's
worked.
Not a new phenomenon. I mean, conservatives in general, for many elections, have bypassed the media because there's always been this perceived sense in Canada as well that the media is biased against anybody that's a conservative, anything that they have, conservative values. So you see a candidate or a prime minister or a premier that's, right-leaning, for example, go straight to the people. Rather than have a big rally, say, in Toronto, they're going to go to smaller communities and they're going to, talk to the local reporters. And I mean, and in this instance, of course, Trump used that. Use social media for that, so he didn't get filtered.
There was something new here, and that was, at least in previous election cycles, conservatives in the United States, at least you had Fox News, which was an opinion maker, a mainstream right. This was the first election cycle where you actually had Trump supporters saying, you know what, Fox News, they considered them traitorous.
That's
and then
Sure.
There were points when Fox News became like the voice of reason, because instead people were going to phony news stories on Facebook about, how Hillary Clinton was found with Vince Foster's body, or, all this completely nonsense crap. But it was something like 40% of these Facebook stories came from Macedonia, of all places, and it wasn't even ideologues. No, there's some cottage industry. This was reported yesterday. Some cottage industry in Macedonia. They're not even ideologues. They just want to make money.
But so there were fake news, there was thoughts, but there were also predictions. If you followed Facebook, you might have known that Trump was going to win.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That ended up, I think, suppressing the turnout for Hillary Clinton, for sure. Right?
538. So the gold standard for a lot of mainstream media types was 538.com, which is run out of the New York Times website. I think it should be said they didn't get it that wrong. They were only off by a few percentage points, and even on 538, they were giving Donald Trump something like a 30% chance to win. And in terms of the popular vote, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote. It's just the
she did. It's just now you see the protests against their own system because they don't like they didn't get the turnout they wanted, and now they're losing their collective minds.
But I just want to get back to an idea that we all spoke of and we saw earlier of perhaps not the most enlightened supporters of Trump seem to pop up and all that. That was clips from satire, but also on the news. You would see all of these people wearing these ridiculous, insulting T-shirts. Did the media inflame, make the division worse?
I think there's two things there. I think one, they wanted to call it out because there was an alarming amount of racism and sexism and Islamophobia which came out on the Trump side, and anti-Semitism. The other thing is you can't, if you're doing video or photo, you can't take a picture of apathy. You can't take a picture of people who stay home. So instead what you do is you take a picture of the most militant supporters of a particular group, which in this case happened to be hothead men with sexist T-shirts.
See, I don't think that's what. To me, what the story here is that we missed the real story for the issues because of the sideshow. Because the sideshow was so attractive. Because those people that we saw in that clip earlier were so attractive to look at, and people just kept on gobbling that up.
And people assumed
right?
that Trump was a sideshow.
Well, sure,
Right.
and he was.